Bless her heart.
All right, so we're talking today about a seller who wants to stay in a property past close of escrow. Right, so basically, we see a property in the MLS. We took our buyer there, and our buyer loves the property. They want to write an offer on the property. And we are talking to the listing agent and trying to figure out what we can do to write a winning offer. Right? So are there other, are we competing with any other offers? Do you have offers currently? What is the seller looking for aside from price? Obviously, the seller wants the most money, right? So yes, we will try to get a number out of the listing agent, but we want to find out what else the seller needs. So again, we want to try to write an offer that's acceptable. What offer can we write that won't get countered? So hopefully the listing agent will cooperate and share with you like to see in an offer. I have seen listing agents prepare a sheet of terms that the seller wants. I've seen some agents do that. So anyone who wants to write an offer, the listing agent will give them a sheet. This is who I want to use for title. This is who I want to use for escrow. This is the, it'll say, the seller can't demand, everything's negotiable. But maybe the sheet will say seller's preferred terms, right? This is what the seller prefers. So obviously, if the buyer wants to win the deal, they're going to agree to all the seller's preferred terms, right? And maybe even try to sweeten them somehow. So when I'm talking to the listing agent, I'm finding out, what does the seller need? Like, what will make us stand out from everyone else? So there's different situations, like why is the seller selling? What's the situation? Maybe you have a seller who is buying a house that is almost finished construction. And it just needs the final finishing touches, but they're not sure if it's going to take another 2 weeks, another month. And in that situation, the seller doesn't want to move twice into a temporary and then into their house. So maybe the seller leaseback would be great for them if they can stay in. Maybe the seller is looking for a place to move to, and they need the money from the sale in order to use as their down payment on another property. So if we're able to close escrow, that gives the seller their money, and then they can go buy a property with that money. They can lease that from the buyer, after close of escrow. Now, the buyer has to be able to not be in a rush to move in, right? So we have to think about all these scenarios. The buyer has to be in a position where they're okay giving time to the seller to stay. So usually there's no situation it's exactly the same. So usually the amount that the seller will pay for rent is PITI. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So that's usually the amount. It's really rare that the buyer will be making a profit on the seller staying. This is really to get the deal. Because the seller, the buyer doesn't want to be a landlord. That's not why. Maybe the buyer is. Maybe the buyer is buying it for an income property, and that's totally fine. The seller can stay as long as they want at a certain rent amount. Then that would be totally fine if you have an investor buyer. But most buyers for single family are looking to move in. So this is just a question for the buyer. I would say to my buyer, the seller would love to have extra time. Now let's also keep in mind we have a lender. There's a lender for our buyer. Lenders don't want to see they don't want to see more than 60-day leasebacks. So if you have someone that needs a 90-day leaseback, the lender won't do it. Probably the lender won't do it. It's possible they will, but anything that has to do with money or not taking immediate occupancy, I need to run it by the lender. Because it's possible the lender could say, we don't even allow a 30-day leaseback. Like, it's possible. So I always want to run it by the lender. What do you think, Sean?
Very accurate.
Okay. So
And why not?
The reason that the vendor.
what's the reason? Because maybe the buyer is buying this with saying that they're gonna move in, they're getting a rate for owner occupied.
Yeah.
And if they're buying an investment property because they really just are gonna rent it, that's a higher interest rate
And a higher down
and a higher
payment.
down payment. So,
And it's for investment.
yeah, so they
And
could
if
be,
it's the investment one, then the lender is okay.
I would much rather buy a property as a single family, as a owner occupied. I'm getting a better rate, less down payment, qualifying for that. If I'm buying a property as an investor, all of a sudden I'm at the investor rate, 30% down instead of 20% down. Right, so,
So as a primary residence, you can get in with as low as 3% if your credit allows it. And your rate in today's market is gonna be between 6 and 7%. As an investor, you automatically jump into a 20% minimum down payment. And the rates are 9-10%.
Wow. Wow.
Like apartment.
Yeah, plus, as an investor, there is prepayment penalty.
yeah.
As a primary occupancy, there is no prepayment penalty.
Lots of reasons to want a primary occupancy loan.
Yeah.
Right, this is my primary house, I'm living there.
And with most lenders, you have to occupy the property within 60 days of closing. If you're getting it as a primary residence.
So if we were to give a maximum lease back, would that be 59 days or can we go 60?
You can go 60.
We can go 60. Okay. So there are some agents that will want a lease back outside of escrow and not make it part of the contract that escrow is aware of. That would be considered mortgage fraud. So we don't want to do that. But we do need to just take all this into account. So again, we're trying to win. We're trying to make our offer win against other potential offers. So now, when you're dealing with any kind of tenancy at all, the terms need to be spelled out. I don't like leaving things to the future. So for an example, we make an offer and then there's a counter offer that just has a one line, seller maintains the right to lease back property up to 6 months. Okay. If I get a counter offer like that and I didn't submit a lease back form, which we'll go over today, with my original offer, I'm going to submit it now on my counter offer. So in a regular lease, let's just say you represent a landlord or you represent a tenant. Usually the listing agent is the one going to be preparing the lease, right? The listing agent's usually the one preparing the lease for the landlord. We need a lease in this situation. There has to be a lease. So I'm just afraid if there's only a one-liner in a counteroffer that says seller reserves the right to lease back property up to 60 days, and that lease is not executed right away, terms can be, there's no terms that have been agreed upon except that the seller can stay. Who's going to pay for utilities? Who's going to pay for the land? Who's going to pay for the gardening? Who's going to pay for the pool? Right? What happens if anything happens? You know, just as an example, I have extended family that owned a house in Beverly Wood, and they sold it and they were in escrow. This was way before I got into real estate. Yes. They were in escrow on property during escrow and after contingencies were removed. So they're the seller. A buyer made an offer on their property, did their inspections, removed contingencies, and then the Northridge quake happened. Oh, I'm sorry, no. They leased back. They actually closed escrow and stayed while they were waiting for their, so they already closed escrow. The Northridge quake happened while they were after close of escrow. So they were in this property, the whole thing cracked everywhere. And the buyer thought that they would still be responsible for the house, like fixing it up before they moved in, because they hadn't taken occupancy yet. Right? So we need to think about who's responsible. We always need to think about who's responsible for the property. Whoever is on title and owns the house, they have to have homeowners insurance. The homeowners insurance is going to cover fire, flood, or earthquake, maybe if you have earthquake insurance. But it's the person on title that has to have that insurance. The tenant needs to have insurance for their personal property, right? So personal property insurance, renter's insurance,
Right.
It covers their stuff. All the leases have general language that say that the landlord is not responsible for the tenant's personal property. So that's a term in the leases. It's just the landlord is not responsible for the tenant's personal property. And there's a recommendation that the tenant get their own insurance for personal property. Now, we need to think about this in a situation where there's going to be the buyer moving in prior to close of escrow, or the seller is going to stay after close of escrow. So, all right, so there's three situations that can occur. The first one is the buyer moves in prior to close of escrow. What do you guys think about that one? The buyer makes an offer, gets their offer accepted, and then is begging the seller, can you please let me move in prior to closing?
That's a hard no.
It's a hard no.
A hard no.
Okay, so you guys all see there's potential issues here, right?
Yeah.
What happens if the loan doesn't close?
Right, yeah.
What happens, right? If something goes wrong and the loan doesn't close, now what? You moved out, the buyer moved in, and
Let them stay there.
the loan doesn't go through, you don't have a lease negotiated. Now what?
You have to evict.
Yeah, okay, so right, so in California, you know, try to get someone evicted, right? It's like, it's crazy now times. You know, we have to be very careful. I have learned a lot from landlords. And the landlords that I learned the most from are the ones that have gotten into trouble with tenants in the past, right? Because they know what to look for. And it makes me crazy as a listing agent when I'm working my tail off and I'm bringing renter after renter with applications and my landlord saying, no, no, no. And I'm thinking to myself, you're crazy. Like, you think I'm going to bring you a better tenant than this? And they're like, no, doesn't make enough money. No. But they know what they're doing. Those kind of landlords, they know what they're doing. They're looking, it's very smart. There are some people you will represent in the future that, you know, expect you to take care of everything. You pick the tenant and you do not pick the tenant, right? So I will never say to a landlord, go with this person. Because then it's on me, you know, they can blame me for it. I always present them the application and I ask, would you like any other additional documentation? Is there anything else you'd like from them? And of course they're gonna say, well, what do you think? I'm gonna say, I don't think, like, that's not, you know, I'm here to get you tenants for you to approve. That's what I'm doing. That's my job. But you have to make the ultimate decision. Obviously, there could be issues down the road. Of course, I hope there aren't, but I don't want to be the one responsible. I say that. I don't want to be the one responsible for picking the tenant. This is up to you as the landlord. You understand why I'm like this, because landlord tenant, you know, I don't want to ruin my relationship with my landlord, seller, investor, right? So, okay. So situation number one is buyer moving in prior to close of escrow. Now, let's just say the seller doesn't have an issue with it and the buyer wants to do it and the seller wants to do it. He's okay with it. In that situation, we have a form called interim, it's called interim occupancy. The actual name for the form is interim occupancy agreement. Interim occupancy agreement. So we'll look at it. There is a form for it. I don't recommend it. even as far as letting the buyer, there, oh, by the way, you guys are always going to be asked by your buyer, can I get the keys a few days early? They're always going to ask for that. And the answer,
No,
no, it should be no. Like, you don't want the buyer to have, oh, now, let's put ourselves in the buyer's shoes, okay? The buyer sent the money to escrow, the loan's going through. They are like being held back by waiting for close of escrow. They want to get in there. They want to start painting. They're in a rush. They want to get their contractor in there. They want to get walls done and the floor done and whatever plans they have, they want to get cracking, right? And their contractor's yelling at them, hey, let's start out the job already. They want in. If you let a buyer in prior to close of escrow, they could easily demolish something, right? Because they're just ready to get started. And then what happens if there's an issue with the loan at the last second? What happens?
They destroyed your property.
Yeah.
They destroyed the property.
The
The loan didn't go through. Now they have to go find another lender to try it, right? And then lenders don't want to make loans on properties that have any kind of mid-construction, anything. So even there are lenders that'll say, no, we're not going to give a loan because the room doesn't have carpeting. Like right, it could happen. So just making you aware of these situations. And there's another issue, the liability issue. The homeowner who's still on title is the one responsible for liability. If a contractor comes on the property and falls off a ladder, it's the homeowner who's still on title that has the liability, right? So this is a liability issue. So whenever a buyer brings up to me, can I get in early? My response is, it's something I always try not to do because of the liability issue. And I bring up that as the reason why, because of the liability issue. I advise you to push back on it. We don't want to end up in lawsuits. That's potential. It's ripe for a lawsuit. Just something happening at that point. Okay, so now in our purchase agreement, we have two different types of seller leasebacks. So the first one is a seller in possession. Seller in possession terms. It's called seller license to remain in possession. So that's a license, and that's used for occupancy less than 30 days. So if the seller is going to be in a property for 29 days or less, we give them a license to remain in the property. That's a lot different than a residential lease after sale. Because a license, if they stay after the terms of their license, they're trespassing. And they can be kicked out by the sheriff. If they sign a lease, they're a tenant. And then you're subject to tenancy, landlord tenancy, eviction, all that. So that's the difference. So if someone does have to stay, we would always prefer it be for 29 days or less. And then if they're going to stay longer, it's a residential lease after sale. Any questions on that?
If it's 29 days, then what is the name of the form?
It's called the seller license to remain in possession addendum. It's in SIP, seller, it's called seller in possession. It's the seller license to remain in possession, SIP. What do you guys think? Okay, so when we're writing the offer, I suggest that we include the residential lease after sale in with our offer, if it's going to be made part of the offer. If that's what the seller wants, I would suggest that we get that done up front. Don't wait for it. Okay, why not? Let's talk about security deposit for a second. Is the seller going to want to pay a security deposit? I mean, let's just say This is towards the end. We're getting towards the end, almost closing escrow. And now we need, all of a sudden, at the last second, we're gonna ask the seller to sign a lease. And the seller's like, why do I have to sign a lease? Like, I own this house. I'm not a tenant. I own it. Like, why do I have to sign a lease? And then you're trying to explain to the landlord why they need to sign a lease. And then they're analyzing the lease and they're going through every term. Security deposit. Why do I pay security deposit? I lived here. What do they think? I'm gonna destroy their house? Okay, so I always want a security deposit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a lot, 5,000, 10,000.
Yeah.
Because what if the movers damage stuff on the way out?
Exactly.
I blame it on the movers. I know the seller loves their, and I say, this is the conversation I have with the listing agent, because I know whatever I say to the listing agent, they're gonna repeat to the buyer, to the seller, right? So my conversation with the listing agent is, I've included the lease back. We are asking for a small security deposit. We know your seller loves their house. They're not gonna destroy their house, but it's just in case the movers do any damage. That's what it's. So, we know the condition because we're going to inspect the property. I advise, right before close of escrow, we just go in for a quick walkthrough. We'll take video of the condition, so there won't be any disputes. I like to do that for my clients. I'll take video. Video is powerful. So me personally, which is part of my value proposition, is if I'm talking to a landlord, I tell them that before the lease starts, I go to the property and I will take probably like at least 45 minutes of video of the condition of the property. And what I do is, I'll stand outside the property and I'll say, today is such and such day, tenant is such and such, and this is the property condition video. And then they'll say, this is the outside, here's the landscaping, here's the condition of the walkway, front door. And I'm looking at the walls and I'll show the address of the property. If there's any light fixtures, I'm gonna look at the light fixtures to see if there's any glass crack in them. If there are screens, I'm looking to see if there's any tears or rips in the screens, that there are there or not there. I'm gonna go in the property. I'm gonna go in the rooms. I'm gonna be looking at carpeting. I'm gonna be looking at the baseboards. Be showing the walls. It's really hard to film stuff that there's nothing wrong with. Your eye is not gonna wanna go where there's nothing wrong. That's where you need to film, where there's nothing wrong. So just keep, I film everything. I take my time. I know this is gonna be a 45-minute video, at least. And I'm taking my time, I'm going through, looking at the doors, I'm looking at the corners, because corners get bumped. So I'm looking at corners. And then what I do when I go through the entire property, I save that to my drive and I have that. What happens is at move out, the landlord wants to charge the tenant for everything. Right? It's now time for the tenant to move out and the landlord has to refund the security deposit. And the landlord's like, I don't remember that. I don't remember that. And that's where I say, okay, make a list of everything you don't remember. And I go through my video and on my Mac, I do Command-Shift-4, which is a screenshot. And I'll show that I'll go exactly to that place and I'll take a screenshot and I will have a picture of what the condition was before. So just recently, there was a tear in the screen outside and the landlord thought that the tenant's dog did it. And I went back to the video I took, it was there. I went back to the previous video I took from the tenant before that tenant and it was there. So I showed her those pictures and it wasn't a dispute. So this is part of a value proposition. What I tell the landlord is I do video and it's great.
JJ,
Yeah.
what about the quick release if you have bars on the windows?
So that's a safety hazard. If you are representing a buyer buying a house that has bars on the windows, there needs to be a quick release mechanism inside that operates. The general inspector will put that in the inspection report if there is not a functioning quick release. So everyone with me, like, there needs to be a way out of the house. If it's on fire, you need to get out through a window, potentially. If the windows are barred and there's nothing to release the bars, their person's trapped. So usually they're not bars. You just open the window and jump out. But if there are bars, there should be something that you can pull up and the bars will swing outward and then you can get out. So yeah, but that is anything that's a hazard, we will be asking the seller for a repair or a credit. And did that answer the question?
Yeah, so it doesn't impede the sale. It just has to be disclosed.
It has to be disclosed. It is a safety hazard. We are going to ask for it. We're going to ask for a credit to repair it, you know, for someone just to take a Sawzall and cut the bars off or whatever. But the seller doesn't have to do it. So again, when we make an offer on a property, the seller is agreeing to sell the property as is at a certain price and close by a certain day. And that's it. So everything that we do as far as investigations, we can ask for things, mostly the hazard things that we're asking for and things we were not previously aware of. But the seller doesn't have to agree, but we'll ask.
And another question,
Yes.
I was sitting with a lawyer and they were talking about the air conditioning. So when you go in, you want to run the air and the heat to make sure everything is working properly.
Yeah, so the general inspector is going to do that.
Okay.
But if you are representing a landlord or tenant, you know, you'll probably want to do that yourself when you walk through with the tenant. Make
Now,
sure everything.
when you have those black marks around the vents, it doesn't necessarily mean mold.
No, that could be air pollution. That could be air pollution. Around the vents is air pollution. So if you're in a property by the freeway and you're looking on the wall and the ceiling next to the vents and they're black, you probably need to change the filters.
Okay, so it could be just the filter
Yeah,
and not mold and behind.
hopefully not mold. Mold, we don't want mold. All right. So now we're going to access our contracts. So we get our contracts from CAR. So I'm going to log into car.org.
Okay, just a quick question. Usually the lease back is free, right?
Do we charge or do we give a free lease back? Okay, so it's an excellent question. If you give a free lease back and the seller stays beyond the lease back, what's the new rent amount?
Zero.
You now have a tenant that's paying zero rent and you agreed to it.
But why would they?
Okay, so just, the person that was waiting for their house to be finished isn't finished yet.
Yeah,
So now they need to stay longer. How much are you gonna charge them?
nothing.
Legally? Nothing.
Prorated.
Okay, so here's what I would suggest. Great question. You asked the question? Okay, great question. There should be a term in your lease back that says the amount, the monthly rent is $7,500 or whatever it is. Monthly rent is $7,500.
Mhm.
However, if the seller moves out by such and such date, that amount will be deemed free,
Yeah,
right? But if the seller stays beyond that amount of time, then the rent shall be X.
Mhm.
So there will be a rent amount for the first portion, the term that was agreed to, and then there'll be a penalty rent amount for future. Because you don't want to be a landlord, your buyer didn't buy the property to be a landlord.
Yep.
So we're gonna put a clause in there. Rent, if you're gonna charge rent, let's say you're gonna charge $7,500, it'll say rent amount to be, and I put the clause in there, we'll see it. Rent to be as stated. If the seller stays beyond that occupancy, the new rental amount shall be. And that's a penalty. And then the seller, I mean, the buyer now feels okay. If they want to pay that, great, you know, but it's a penalty now. But that protects our buyer. And the seller shouldn't have a problem with it, right? Because they're agreeing to move out on time. This is all in good faith now, right? We're just protecting our buyer, what if? Right, so no one should have a problem with it. If they have a problem with it now, think about the problem you would have had trying to get them to sign this right before closing.
Right.
Right, so that's why we want everything now. Exactly why. Okay, so we're logging into CAR, and then we have to go through this ridiculous click, click, click. I have no idea why they do this. But we're gonna click on transactions. Is my screen being shared?
Yeah. Oh, here it is.
Is it? I hope. Can you guys online see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. So I'm clicking transactions. And then I'm gonna click transactions again. Access now. I don't know why they do this. Access now. And then again, another click.
They gotta make sure that you paid your dues.
I guess.
They double
Check and
check,
triple
triple
check.
check.
Continue to transactions. Yes. Again. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, it's loading.
Okay, good. All right, so here's the dashboard. Well, is it the dashboard? I'm not sure it's the dashboard. This is the dashboard. I'm gonna go to transactions. And then if I'm gonna create a new transaction, we're making an offer, I'm just gonna hit this new.
I'm sorry, is this real secure transaction or
This-
transaction zip form?
This is through CAR,
Yeah,
and then,
I have like multiple.
oh, transactions access now.
So sorry to interrupt, JJ. I went to CAR, I'm logged in, I went to transactions, and then I don't see what you see.
Okay, I'm logging
Okay,
out. I'm logging out.
Sorry, brother.
No, I'm logging out to start from fresh. Okay, so I'm going to car.org. So I'm at the car.org home screen. I can either sign in right here at the upper right, or I can go directly to transactions. It'll ask me to sign in. So I'm just gonna hit transactions. And then I'm gonna hit access now over here. Transactions. Access now. And it's gonna ask me to sign in. So I'm gonna sign in. And now again, I'm gonna have to go over here. Continue to transactions. Did that get you here?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm still, it gave me some pop-ups and stuff, so let me see, skip, blue screen, yes, I got you, thank you.
Okay, good. So from here, if you want to create a new transaction, then you're gonna hit new. You're gonna hit new. You'll do a new lease or a new, but this is really with our purchase offer. So we're gonna do new purchase offer, and then we'll just call it an address, 1234 Maple Ave, and save. So this is property type is required. So it's residential active. Save. So this is just creating a new transaction. So now from here, we're gonna click on all forms up in the corner. And then we're gonna do a California residential purchase agreement. Because that's what we're doing. We're writing an offer.
Hold on, let me just, because I'm saving it, and it is, I'm gonna write it down as, what is it, residential, I have to choose one, whatever, it's just an example, right?
Just an example. I'm just putting a fake address in, creating an address. California residential, we're adding a form called California Residential Purchase Agreement. I just watch what I'm doing, because when it's ready time to write an offer, you're gonna call me and say, JJ, I need to write an offer. We're gonna do this together. Right now, I just want to go through it so you guys see it. That make sense? Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the RPA.
The RPA. Okay, so we're in the RPA. So this is the residential purchase agreement. And then if we go into the residential purchase agreement, it's saying, there's a part here where it says time of possession. So in this paragraph here, it's talking about possession. So usually, if we don't touch anything in the contract, it's saying that the time of possession is going to be upon notice of recordation. So what is closing escrow? Closing escrow means that the grantee, the single piece of paper that says, I, the owner of this property, hereby grant to new buyer. When that piece of paper gets recorded downtown, that's closing. Now, what happens is, as soon as that's recorded, I'm gonna get a phone call from escrow or from my title officer saying, congratulations, JJ, we recorded. Okay. That's when I say, thank God. And I pick up my phone, I call my client, and I say, congratulations, we recorded. We're good. That's a phone call, not a text message, right? That's a phone call. Thank you for your business. I know you could have used other people, never would have, but thank you. I really appreciate the business. Thank you very much. Congratulations. What are we doing next? So that's a call. Now that's when property actually transfers. It's on recording. Okay. This used to say 5 p.m. and now it says upon notice of recordation, which is true. So what I do as a listing agent, I will have the keys to the property in a lockbox, in a combination lockbox, not a Supra. In a combination lockbox, I'll have the keys to a property there. When I get the phone call, congratulations, we recorded, I'll call the other agent and say, congratulations, I just got confirmation that we recorded. The code to the lockbox is blank. You can get the key there or tell your client the keys are there, and the rest of the keys are in the kitchen drawer.
The rest of the keys are
Are
where?
in the kitchen drawer,
Oh, okay.
right? But the key to get into the property is in the lockbox. Because once we record, it's no longer the seller's property. It's like they can't even go there to pick anything up. It's trespassing.
Right.
Once we record it, it's the new buyer's property. All right, so now here it says occupied units by tenants. There's a checkbox for that. But here, right here, it says seller occupied or vacant units. Close of escrow date. Or if checked below. So we have two different options here. How many days after close of escrow? How many days after close of escrow? The first one is going to be 29 or fewer days, and the bottom one is going to be 30 or more. So these are two different things. It says CAR form SIP if 29 or fewer days, and CAR form RLAS if more than 30 days. So again, the SIP is the seller in possession, which is a license, and then the residential lease after sale is 30 or more days. All right. Now we're going to go back to the one that I have filled out. Going back to my transactions, and I have here my contract class documents. So let's just take a quick look at the residential lease after sale. We're not going to get so crazy into it. We are doing leases tomorrow, but let's just look at the document. Let's look first at the license. The license again is for less than 30 days. And it's not a lease. This is a license to remain in possession. And the difference is if they stay longer than this, they can be kicked out for trespassing. So you can actually call the police and say, there's someone trespassing in my house. Now, are you going to do that? No, you don't want them destroying the house, right? And if they call you as the agent, which you will get this phone call, right? You really don't want to get involved in a landlord-tenant situation,
No.
but you'll call the other agent. You'll say, we have an issue and I need your help. Your seller client, because we're usually on the, if you know, I don't know, it depends what side we're on, but we will be calling the other agent, hey, I need your help. And the other agent's on their side, on the seller side, whoever's staying in the property. You might be representing the seller, right? And then your seller is calling you saying, I need more time, I need more time. You know, once it gets to this landlord-tenant issue, we really are supposed to refer it to legal and tell our clients, you need to it's time to contact your real estate attorney and get advice, because I can't give you legal advice. I can prepare contracts, I can help you with all of that. But once there's a dispute, that's where that's not my capacity. Like that's not what I do. Like that's not my job. So I want to help you, of course, any way I can. but I'm not an attorney. That's not, if there's a landlord tenant dispute, you need to get proper consulting. And I don't want to give you the wrong advice, Leslie. I don't want to give you the wrong advice, right?
Right.
Okay, so seller license to remain, let's just take a quick look at it. So you have the property address. This is probably an addendum to the purchase agreement. If it's an addendum to a counter offer, meaning we wrote an offer, the seller gave us a counter with one line saying that the seller can stay on the property. Okay, now as the buyer's agent, we need to give a counter and attach this, because we don't want one line. We want an agreement that has terms in it. The seller is granted a license to remain in the property for, you can put whatever number in there, 29 days or less. And then here's the amount of the term. So we can put amount, or it can say free. If it says free and they stay, it could cause an issue. Good, because now they have, there's no rent amount that's been discussed. So this just has to be looked at very carefully. Utilities, all utilities to remain in the seller's name until moved out. I always put this in every lease back. Utilities will stay in the seller's name until they move out. That's very clear. If there's a gardener and a pool man, I want to make sure that the seller continues to pay their gardener and their pool man until move out. It's very important until move out. I don't say until this date, say until move out, right? I put a little clause here. Seller agrees to be responsible for and maintain the property in its current pre-close of escrow condition until move out. That means the seller should not be calling my new buyer landlord to replace a light bulb or a filter or something, right? If a pipe breaks, they shouldn't be calling my buyer who hasn't even taken possession of the property yet with a problem.
Yeah.
The property was in this condition when we went into escrow. And if we're letting you stay there, you agree to maintain it until we take possession. Is that fair? I think that's fair. Like they're being able to stay there. So a seller should have no problem agreeing to this upfront. They're going to give the property in the same condition as it was. All right. So seller agrees to be responsible for and maintain the property in its current pre-close of escrow condition until move out. I think that's fair. But why not? If there's a problem, why? Right? I want to know why. All right. So that's the one we're using for a seller staying 29 days or less.
Hi, DJ.
Hi.
Question.
Yeah.
This is Suki. So going back to that amount
Okay.
per month,
Yes.
sometimes we don't have the exact amount at the beginning. It's just an estimation. So what do we put there?
So you can actually write in here, if it's asking for an amount, you can fool the contract by just hitting the space bar a few times, and it'll let you write in something with that only wants numbers. But you can put here PITI.
Okay.
And that is totally legit. Everyone will know what that is.
Okay. So it's okay to put PITI.
PITI, principal,
Okay.
interest, taxes, and insurance, and escrow will figure that out.
Mhm.
And that's a pretty safe way to do it, because
Got it.
that might change depending on if the insurance amount changes, right? Or the loan changes.
Correct.
So that's a good way to do it. Good question. Thank you.
That
All right.
stands
Okay.
for principal.
Interest, taxes, and insurance.
JJ, I have a question.
Yes.
So when it's 29 days, this is like an Airbnb, right?
Yeah, so, there's also a form that I found here called vacation rental agreement. This is a CAR form. I mean, it has nothing to do with this class, but it is a sort of lease kind of thing. It's called a vacation rental agreement. And that means it's not a lease document. So with this, potentially, you could also say someone's trespassing. Okay, vacation rental agreement. It has to do with arrival and departure times. So
It has to be less than 30 days.
also less than 30 days, yes. It actually says it somewhere.
It's second line under title. Intended.
Oh, yeah, intended for occupancy of 30 days or less. Yeah, thank you. So I just letting you know that exists. There is something called vacation rental agreement. Okay, and then here we go, residential lease. Okay, so this is the one we're gonna be going over tomorrow, the residential lease. But right now, we have this one, the residential lease after sale. So this is the form that's gonna get added. If we check that box in our purchase agreement for 30 days or more than 30 days. Residential lease after sale. The date here will be the date that you're filling it out. It's either gonna be with your offer or with your counter offer. It'll have the name of the seller and the buyer. It says your close of escrow for the purchase agreement is scheduled to occur on date. Now, if we're filling this out, the time that we're writing the offer, we're not sure what the actual close of escrow date is gonna be yet. Because we can still have a couple of more counter offers that go a couple of days, right? So we can't really even put a date here yet because we're not sure that close of escrow date. So just type COE, close of escrow. Housing provider rents to tenant. Here's the property, the premises are for sole use of personal residence. So here we're gonna put the names of the occupants. So obviously the buyers are gonna occupy. If they have kids, I'll put them in there. If grandma's staying too, over there.
You mean the sellers, not the buyers?
The premises, oh, I'm sorry, correct. Name of seller. You are correct, thank you.
In this is we sell a home or property, but tenants are still.
And I will put this in my shared documents after the class.
Tenants get to stay.
Essence, what did you say?
Oh, no, I was just see, the sellers get to stay, they will be.
Sellers get to stay.
Okay.
Sellers get to stay.
Okay.
So the
Thank you.
sellers will be the people staying there and anyone else occupying. And then here we go. The term begins the day after close of escrow, right? And shall terminate. So I just wrote in here 45 days, but that could be whatever you guys are agreeing to, not more than 60. Because if there's a lender involved, they don't want that, right? Okay, let's talk about this. Escrow payments, security deposit, and the first month's rent. Rent for the entire lease term. So we want this to. So that's, it's called, we're putting there in the escrow area. So we want it to be paid through escrow. That means, what that means is the seller is going to get a lot of money when they sell the house, right? But escrow is not going to give them all that money. They're going to give the buyer what they're owed for this. So we need to make sure that we're seeing the estimated closing statements for our buyer. And we want to make sure that credit is appearing on our buyer's estimated closing statement. We want to see a credit there from the seller for the security deposit and any rent that was agreed to. Okay? I said that fast. I just want to make sure everyone understood. No. Did everyone like, we're not asking for a check from the seller for the security deposit and for the rent. We're not asking them to pay that from their pocket. We're asking for them to pay it at close of escrow. So escrow will give us the money. Escrow is going to give the buyer the money.
Nothing from.
They don't have to pay us directly. It's going to go through escrow because don't forget escrow, when the seller closes escrow, they're getting a ton of money for the closing. So escrow is going to give them a little less because they're taking the security deposit out of what they're getting and the rent. And that's going to go towards the buyer. Here's the rent amount. So I just put here 10,000. Tenant agrees to pay per month 10,000 for the term of the agreement. Now, that says for the term of the agreement. It does not say per month. Oh, it says tenant. Oh, I'm sorry. It does. Tenant agrees to pay per month. I'm used to seeing that per month after the number. Okay, so tenant agrees to pay per month $10,000 for the term of the agreement. Rent is payable in advance on the first and is delinquent the next day. So that's automatically in there. Okay, here's where we're going to check the box. Payment, the rent shall be paid through escrow. That's how we want to collect the money. And then rent shall be delivered to
Buyer.
name of buyer. Thank you. Name of buyer one, name of buyer two.
Escrow collecting the deposit.
I'm used to doing a lease.
But then the rent
Yeah.
is coming to the new buyer or still escrow? Escrow pays the buyer.
Escrow pays the buyer out of the seller's money.
out of the seller's money. And then monthly payments continue to go.
Okay, so then we're not discussing what they stay.
This is
So we're not,
30
we're not
days.
discussing what happens if they want to stay past their time allowed,
Yeah.
right? So that's an issue
Okay,
because the buyer's not buying this. They want to move in.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay,
60-day lease.
so we put the names of our buyers there. I did check this box, cashier's check, but it says if any payment is returned for non-sufficient funds. So this question here, returning for non-sufficient funds doesn't really apply because we're not getting a check, it's going through escrow. But I might want to have that box checked just in case this turns into a lease. Okay. All right, security deposit, it's hot in here. And security, tenant agrees to pay 10,000 as a security deposit. Again, you can put any number here you want. And if there's any pushback on this, it's because you want to make sure that there's no damage from the movers. So if the movers scrape the floor, dragging something across the floor, that's gonna have to get repaired. If they bang walls, if there's stairs, if they're taking big, heavy furniture items downstairs, there's potential there for drywall repair, stair repair, it can get costly. Contractors are not cheap nowadays. Okay, and then that security deposit, I'm checking the box, it'll be paid through escrow. And it's going to be transferred to and held by the owner of the premises. It's very important that you guys are careful to check these boxes. Otherwise, it will be held by escrow. We don't want escrow holding the security deposit. We want it to be transferred to the buyer. Right? So make sure, check those boxes. It's going to be paid through escrow and it's going to be transferred to and held by the owner of the premises. We don't want to go.
JJ,
Yeah.
I've got a question now, because you just mentioned that the rent payments would be specifically going towards escrow. But now in this instance here, you're saying that the security deposit, it'll be sent directly to the buyer outside of.
No, not outside. Not outside. Both the security deposit and the rent will be paid through escrow. Both of them.
Okay.
This is just a separate area that talks about the security deposit. So up here it talks about rent. And down here it talks about security deposit.
So the money is ultimately going to the buyer, but who's paying is escrow.
Escrow will be responsible for collecting it from the seller and transferring it to the buyer.
Whatever money is exchanging during the transaction, escrow will be responsible
Correct.
for that.
Yes. It's just going to be on the seller's statement, it's going to say credit to buyer, security deposit plus rent. And on the buyer statement, it's going to say credit from seller, security deposit and rent. But that's all. It's just a.
So technically speaking, besides the security deposit, the buyer's really not gonna get that money because it's gonna go as a credit in the statement. So it's gonna go against their down
The
payment,
buyer is actually,
closing costs.
the buyer is actually, instead of the buyer having to bring 20,000 to closing or 50,000 to closing, they're now gonna bring 40,000 to closing. They got credited. Right? It's a credit.
And we see that money as a,
You see it in the form, in the closing disclosure, but you're not gonna touch it.
Okay, late charge, you're allowed to collect up to 6%. If there's a late fee for a return check. So again, this is the seller staying in a property. It's not a regular lease. This is, it's sort of a regular lease, but it's not, because you have a seller who's been living in this property for years, and now they're just moving out and being allowed to stay a little longer. So we're not really filling out the parking part or the storage part. I'm not really concerned about that. Utilities, it says here, tenant agrees to pay for all utilities and services. I wrote all utilities to remain in seller's name. It should say until move out. There wasn't enough room. But all utilities to remain in seller's name. Obviously, the seller is not going to keep them in their name when they move out. So it's fine. All utilities to remain in seller's name. And then here, this is the condition of the premises. Seller is responsible for all maintenance and will maintain the property in the same condition until move out. Okay. Why not? The tenant shall water the garden. The tenant shall maintain the garden. That means keep paying for the gardener. The tenant shall maintain the property and deliver it to buyer in the same condition as prior to close of escrow. Everyone okay with that? And the tenant, who's the seller, shall maintain the property and deliver it to the buyer in the same exact condition as prior to close of escrow. So this just says, until the buyer takes possession, the seller is responsible for everything.
So in this case, technically speaking, you'd be doing 2 final walkthroughs?
Yeah, so right before closing, I'm gonna come in with my camera. I'm just gonna take video, so there's no dispute. Everyone should be fine with that, right? Taking through, this is the condition right now. The seller knows the condition of their property, but so there's not a dispute later, let's just record it. Right. So take the recording, they move out, right? Then when I'm giving the keys to my buyer, I'm going with them. And I'm waiting for them. How's it going? How you doing? They took the chandelier. Right. All right, so that's pretty much it. I mean, we talked about all the possible scenarios. But you know, my advice is just, yeah. Question? What happened with Eric? I hope
This is Suki again. I have another question. So
Okay.
it's time that,
Uh-oh, you're cutting out.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So when it's time to give the seller his deposit back, how does that work?
The buyer will have to cut a check to the seller.
Not escrow.
Through-
because
It's not gonna go
Is it
back,
through
it's not gonna go
escrow?
through. No, hopefully not. If escrow is holding the money, then escrow can't release the money without both signing. Escrow won't do anything without the buyer and seller both signing something. Just asking about definition. It's just this room that doesn't have air. It's only this room that doesn't have air.
Yeah.
Is it just me? No, it's everybody.
I had this big sweater because I'm already really cold.
All right.
Such problems to have.
All right, I mean,
I have
that's,
the last
yeah,
question.
yeah.
So how about the extended escrow time? Do you recommend that?
Oh, that's a good question. So someone actually texted me yesterday and said the seller needs an extra 2 days. We're gonna do a lease back for 2 days. I said, why don't you just extend escrow 2 days? And she said, great idea. I didn't think of that.
But that's 2 days. How about when?
Just
it's
extend
29
closing for 2 days. Huh?
When it's 29 days, then can we still do that? Like escrow closing?
Oh, no, because no, we're talking, okay. So in that situation, the seller was occupying and needed 2 days. They had a close of escrow date. The seller can always stay up to close of escrow. Right?
Yeah.
The seller can always stay up to close of escrow. So that now the seller was wanting to stay 2 days beyond close of escrow. And I just said, extend escrow 2 days. That solves all the problems.
Yes, but when it's the lease back situation.
Lease back situation and the seller wants to remain past the agreed upon term,
Exactly.
then it has to be negotiated.
So I think her question is, instead of doing a lease back,
Yeah.
can you extend escrow for up to 30 days?
Or like, then the close of escrow will be 60 days.
So again, everything's negotiable, has to be agreed upon by the buyer, the seller, and the lender. My concern right now is interest rates.
Yeah.
Can the buyer keep their interest rate? Will there be a cost to extend the rate lock?
Yep.
Will the seller pay for that cost?
How long you can lock the rate without any?
Typically 30 days. And then every time you extend it, it costs money on a daily basis. Now, the flip side of that statement, JJ, is life happens, right?
Life happens here. I put here, look, if there's another, I wrote under other terms and conditions. If tenancy exceeds the stated termination date, the new rental amount shall be $15,000 per month. Okay, so there's a penalty clause in there too. What happens? it's better to anticipate these things. And I don't want to play attorney. So you have to be very careful about language that you add in the contract. If you ask Michael Rosales, he'll say, don't make up language, basically. Say, don't make up your own language. Use the CAR contracts. And the way that I go about how I make my language, I want to be as short, to the point, and I don't want to leave any area of interpretation. I want to be very clear. And if I have to add more words to be very clear, I will do that. There should be no dispute what I'm trying to say, right? You had another question?
So it's better not to do that 60 days escrow closing. It's better to get the lease back.
So it's really a lender question and a buyer and seller. Everyone has to be on board. So, right? I mean, everyone wants the deal to go through. Yeah. The buyer usually wants in quickly so they can start doing their repairs. Buyer's okay with letting them stay, and the lender's okay with it, then
It's negotiable.
it's negotiable. Us as agents, we want to get paid ASAP. So I'm always pushing, let's close. Let's close as fast as possible. And you want to close as fast as possible because anything can happen. Anything can happen. Like I want my check.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, of course, I don't come first in the transaction, but I want to get paid. And if there's an opportunity for something to go wrong, time is what's going to make that happen. So let's close right away. And then we'll figure it out. But let's figure it out, but let's close it as fast as possible. So whenever, I'm sorry, I just want to say, whenever there's a conversation about extending escrow, I will say, let's close and do a lease back. I will push for that because if you extend escrow, there is the opportunity for the deal to go south.
Yeah.
We don't want that. And our job as agents is to make the deal go through.
Yeah.
That is our job. Our job is to make the deal go through. I'm sorry, we had a question online. I know. Don't forget your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to, can we throw in a replacement property situation?
1031?
No, in the sense of the seller agreed prior to listing that they will have time to find a replacement property.
Right. So a buyer who goes into contract with a seller, and the seller has a contingency to find a replacement property. The buyer is, basically the seller you're going into contract with the seller who has the right to cancel. So it's
For that to fill out.
a form, yeah. Well, it's a contingency. It's in the purchase contract. It's just a checkbox.
Yeah.
Seller has the right to find a replacement property.
And the form comes out, which is very difficult and tedious.
It's hard for the buyer is not going to be able to enforce the sale with that. If the seller wants out, the seller will get out.
And we can lease it back and they keep their furniture, everything there.
So regarding furniture in anything, whenever you have furniture, even in a lease, you need to. So I'm so crazy, I'm crazy. When I'm doing my video, I'm recording the model numbers of the washer and dryer and the oven. I do. I open the oven and there's a label.
Yeah.
I record it. And then I go to the washer and dryer. I record it. I look at the condition. I open it. I record the label, the serial number, the model number. I do it on all the appliances.
Yeah. Wow. In case you have to.
Yes.
So now I have
That's what I'm
two.
concerned, that's like.
So the first thing is, to your point, life happens, right? So if you extend escrow and the seller dies, you don't get paid.
Oh my gosh.
That's right.
That's one thing.
I am in an escrow right now where one of the sellers has passed away and there was no will and no trust.
Yeah.
I'm in that escrow right now. One of my sellers passed away.
So that's an example of the transaction going south,
Yeah.
right? Because you extended escrow. The second one is to the oven and
Yes.
Pictures and.
in just last month, I was in a deal with on the mortgage side with a realtor partner of mine in Florida. They did the walkthrough and between the walkthrough closing and the buyer moving in, the fridge changed. Yeah, so
Who
they,
found out?
the buyer opened the fridge and it was completely different.
Yeah.
So
then-
I'm aware of these tricks, and that's why I do that.
So eventually the seller paid or gave the buyer credit for a new fridge. But these are things that happen.
Chandeliers, gotta be careful, you gotta film all the chandeliers, all the mirrors. You have some very expensive framed mirrors.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, gotta record everything. That's why I do video. Yeah, fireplace screens, if you wanna have a fireplace screen in your offer, you better write it in. Write it in as included, yeah.
In the case of lease, let's say that you want to lease to a tenant, and before they move in, the refrigerator goes bad or the oven goes bad, you have to replace the same time.
So we're
The
gonna,
same thing, otherwise they say you didn't disclose to me that the oven doesn't work.
right.
I was working while I
We're
was.
gonna talk about leases tomorrow, but that's a good question. As far as what I'm aware of, you can't take away an amenity from a tenant. So if you have a tenant that has an oven that has a self-cleaning feature, you need to replace it with an oven that has a self-cleaning feature. You just can't take away an amenity.
Right, right.
And this lease kind of makes you now have.
You're a landlord.
You're a landlord.
yeah.
and
You're a landlord. So
you
you
need to
really-
interrupt
You need to
there.
protect yourself upfront. Now, everything I've read about leasebacks online
Yeah.
says that you should be telling your client to seek legal advice. I mean, we don't do that, but we should be doing that. Like, when you start talking about landlord tenant, they should have advice from an attorney. I don't like to bring attorneys into my deals because they can blow them up. Business managers and attorneys, they blow up deals,
Yeah.
but, you know, if there's a landlord tenant question, I have found that my high-end clients always have attorney review everything. Not just because they don't trust me, but because that's their business. Like, they have, before they sign anything, they have an attorney review. So I've found that in my high-end clientele. They always have attorney review and everything. All right. So, all right, that's it. I mean, today it's just about leasebacks. That's what we did. Tomorrow we'll talk about leases. And we'll go through the full lease. Again, a lease is the quickest money you can make. You can get a tenant, take them to a property, sign a lease, and pay it within a couple of days. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. So just so you know, today, like we're talking about, if you're writing an offer and there's gonna be a lease back, just get the paperwork done with the offer. And if there's a bunch of offers being written on a property, and the listing agent told everyone that there's gonna be a lease back, and you're like one of the only agents that wrote an actual lease back already, they're gonna look at your offer very favorably. Like, this is a good agent, knows what they're doing, they're including all the paperwork. That's gonna take your offer far. Okay. All right, guys.
Do you have that form in the email?
I'm gonna, yeah, because it's just a talk about lease backs today.
We can talk about other things.
I can, so, what I'd like to do, so what time is it? It was quick. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take one property and comp it.
Yeah, let's.
I want to comp a property.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we can do that quickly,
Yes.
right? Comp a property.
You know,
This is part of it. But what I will do is I'll print these and put them in the contracts, folder. Okay. All right, so let's comp a property.
another house if you need.
Sorry.
So I have another house if you need one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's good. All right, so I'm logging out CAR, sign out. All right, so to comp a property, I'm going to go into the MLS. He closed that door and prevented our airflow.
When she opened, I could fix
She
it.
doesn't know what she. Oh my God.
No, we need
She's
that.
listening to us talk and.
No.
Hindi ko anong kaya choose lang.
Extra pen, go for it. All right, so we're logging into the MLS. Trying to. All right. So whenever we do comps, we're gonna do first do a public record search. And then we're going to write down a little bit of information. Okay, so first I'm gonna go to search, public records, MLS Realty X. That's step number one. Public record search, and the address we're gonna be searching today is? Address.
I have.
Either one.
You can.
No, you do it. I did it the other day.
So it's 1646 North Kirsten Avenue.
Curson?
CURS.
1646 North Curson Avenue. And then we're gonna press search. Okay, so the first thing I do is I look through the public records and get as much info as I can. So according to this, it doesn't say the word MLS here anywhere, so this is probably public record, so it's a two bed, one bath, sold for 1.3 in 2022, so it just sold May of last year. Okay, now whenever I see a recent sale date, I'm thinking to myself, that's the value unless they added something to the property.
Square footage, right?
But now, I'm not seeing anything about MLS yet, so this could have been sold off market. But usually, if there's a sale price on a recent sale, that's the market value.
Yeah.
Usually. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. All right, so 1,256 feet. And then the lot is 4729. Built in 22.
And we need the APN number, right?
And we need the APN number. So it's the owner name is in an LLC, which could mean to me that it's a flip.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. It's zoned R3. Important. So that means you can have three
Units.
You can have 3 units there. Okay. Here's the APN number, which I'm writing down because for some MLS searches, it's the only way I'll get results. Okay. All right, so let's see. Here's the public records. 1256, 100 square feet. 6 bedroom, okay, so 2 bedroom, 1 bath. It has a fireplace. So now I'm going here to the sales history. It was recorded July 14th for 1.3. And this person, Mueller, whoever Mueller is, owned it for a long time. So here's 1991, it's already that. So it was owned for a long time and then sold last year. It recorded July 14th. So I don't know why there's a discrepancy between these. I have no idea. Okay, now I do see here at the same day of recording, there was a $975,000 mortgage recorded. So what I know about the property right now is they paid 1.3 and borrowed 975. Okay. Now I know that. There's a little map. So it looks like it's backing up to something. Okay, we're gonna look at that when we do our comps. So we're gonna do comps now. I'm going to go search CMA. which should open a new window. And I'm gonna, at the bottom here, create new CMA. Create new CMA, and I'm gonna call it the property address. What was it?
1646 North Carson Avenue.
1646 North Person Avenue. And this is a single family residence.
Yes,
Okay, so right now I'm naming my CMA.
Is it Crescent Drive? Because there's 2%. There's one
Avenue.
Crescent Drive, and there's one Crescent in the, one is in Beverly Hills and one is
no,
in
no, that's in Hollywood,
This is the Hollywood one.
Carson Avenue.
Oh, the Hollywood.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm naming my CMA and my name of the client, I'm still naming it the same property address. Residential single family, continue.
That's Crescent.
Now I'm adding the subject property. So the subject property is that property. So I'm gonna look up a specific property. I can look it up by address, MLS number, or APN. I did record the APN before. I'm just gonna look it up by the APN number, so I could write that down. Search. And here we are. I don't know which is the most recent here. So I'm just gonna select public records, I guess. I don't know, because I don't know which is the most recent, unless I go back into the MLS and search. I'm guessing this one is probably, because it's an SR, maybe. I don't know. I'm just gonna use public. It doesn't really matter to me. Find comparables. Find comparables. Now I'm taken to the regular search screen. So if you were to go search listing and then pick one of these, this is the screen that we're going to right now. The difference between going search CMA is that when you search CMA, that gives you the ability to choose a subject property, which is going to be compared to your search results. So that's the only difference. I can go search listing, and then I can get a bunch of results, what I'm searching for. Or I can go search CMA and first pick my subject property and then go to this screen. Okay.
Why would the other be advantageous? When would you go the other?
The other one, when I'm just searching for a buyer for property, I just go search listing and I look for active homes. But once we find the home we like, then I go search CMA, pick the home we like, and then go to the search screen for solds, because solds are comps. So now I'm going to go sold.
Can I stop you for a quick second? So I'm on step 2 of the CMA wizard.
Okay. Step 2 is selecting comps. Or yeah.
What is this where you
Step
put
1
the
is
APN?
naming it.
Yeah,
And step 2
is the APN screen.
I put the APN.
Right. So when I put the APN, I got 3.
You got 3 results. The one that doesn't have an MLS number in the beginning is the public records.
Okay.
I chose that one because I'm not sure which is the most recent.
Okay.
I would normally choose the most recent one, but I don't know which one. So I just chose the public records.
Okay, understood.
Okay, so now I'm going to the search screen and I'm going to choose sold property. I'm going to click that D. That D pulls up a new window for the date. And I'm going to go back 6 months. I might go back 12. Now, an appraiser can only go back 6 months. So that's why I'm going back 6 months. In a really, really hot market, I might go back 3 months, right? So I'm gonna go 6 months back and press OK. Now I need to find the area that I'm looking for. Instead of doing it here, I'm gonna press map search. This is the most accurate way to look at an area. I'm gonna do a map search because there's a lot of things can appear to you here when you do a map search. So I'm gonna put the APN number 5550 008 004. Locate. Okay, boom, takes me right in there. I'm going to change my view from this road view up here. By just hovering over a road, I'm going to change it to aerial. Now I have an aerial view and I'm going to zoom in. Okay. So the area that I'm going to choose, I'm not going to cross a major road. So I'm not going to go north of Hollywood Boulevard. I'm not gonna go south of Sunset.
Greetings, neighbor. I'm your local realtor. I would like the opportunity to overview,
Mute.
to cover.
All right, so now, I want to look at this property. I see it's back to back with this huge building, okay? That is a lot different than a property here. You have privacy here. Here in the backyard, you might have all these units able to look into your backyard. Like, I don't know. I need to know a little more about what that property is, but it is next to what appears to be very dense multifamily. If you're buying a house inside here, you're amongst other single family homes. I would say that this property is going to be worth a little less as a single family than these homes. If this is a multifamily, because it is zoned R3, now that might make the property worth more.
Yeah.
Okay, so, these are just things to take into account. I need to know my buyer, I need to know the property. So right now I'm just doing a blind, right? So knowing that this is zoned R3 now, I might go back to my criteria and only choose R3 to compare with. So I'm gonna draw a polygon now. This is gonna look weird to you. I'm gonna go across these properties. I think only those are gonna be the R3. Because the rest are single family, probably R1. Let's just see what those are in that area against those buildings.
2 and 3 blocks.
Better direction. Let's see how this is like, it looks like a different area.
Yeah, and you know what? There is a fine line between that area and HPOZ. So do you think?
But we see this area here, it's really gorgeous. There's a lot of trees there. It's more green.
Yeah.
It's different. It just looks different. That's why I like to use this. Whenever you see darker, more green, it means to me more expensive. And look here. All right, so, all right, let's just see if we get any results. I'm gonna press enter, count. So I only have one sale in the past 6 months. I'm gonna click the D again, and I'm gonna go change it to 12 months now and go back and count, see if I have any more sales. There was an additional sale. All right, let's press CMA and see what we get.
And there was not much available in 6 months, so we.
Well, this,
run the
I'm seeing here the same property sell twice.
So they're buying.
So something happened here. It has one extra bathroom. Similar, little higher on this, on the land size. But look at this. It was listed for 1.2 and it sold for 1.335. Then it was listed this year. Look at this. List date September 22, sold November 22 for 1.335. Then it was listed in May for the same exact price, 1.2, and sold for 1.340. So this buyer seller lost money because they had to pay closing costs. They had to pay commissions, transfer taxes, closing costs. Now, how does that affect our property? What's our property worth? It's probably worth in that 1.335 to 1.340 range, but it does have a little more square feet, but it has one less bathroom. And this was a larger lot. So I'm really gonna have to go and look at it and see what the rents are. Maybe there's rents. So now if we're talking about income, properties are also valued based upon the income that they produce. So there's a little more research I need to do. Yeah.
You said they lost money when they resold it.
Yeah, they lost money.
As a result of it.
Well, they paid 1.335 and they sold for 5,000 more, but their closing costs were
Is
probably
it something like a
$17,000.
domestic problem, like a divorce or something?
We have no idea. What we could do is call the agent and say, hey, what's the story? I mean,
If you're in competitive market, being R3, that somebody is gonna grab it very. So, I mean, is there any price range?
so whenever we're dealing with income property, there's a lot of scenarios, right? So now I need to know, is it tenant occupied? How long have they been there? Are they, right? Or was this property completely vacant? Because that'll make the property price more if it's completely vacant, because that means I can start charging market rate.
Right, that's right.
Right, so there's further investigation needed,
Right,
but
absolutely.
this is how I do comps. But from what I'm seeing, there's a little further investigation needed because it's an R3 lot and because there's potential for income. I need to know more. What am I finding out more? This property that was sold for 1,340, were there improvements made? Were there tenants there? You know, it's possible that they bought it, found out that the tenants can't be kicked out and that they have a dog.
Right.
And it's gonna be a forever dog because those tenants are gonna stay forever. They can't raise the rents on them. And they'd rather just sell it, take the loss down, take their money and go somewhere else.
That's very.
That could be what happened. I don't know. So I might call the agents, right? I might read what's going on. So let's just take, just for the fun of it, let's see. When they originally bought it, let's see what it was. So the first thing I'm gonna look at is the zoning. It's an R1. So this is an R1 property. I'm gonna make sure by clicking on the address and going with public records. That's a quick shortcut. If you click the address, it'll take you to the public records. So I'm just looking to make sure what the zoning is. I wanna confirm. So if it's an R1, it's technically not even a comp. It's technically not, yeah, LAR1. It's not comparable. So your probably might be worth more as an R3.
But they listed for less than that right now. That's why I was confused.
So
It's on.
the fact that yours is an R3 is valuable. It's valuable. It's probably, it could be worth more than this. I need to know more. There's more, like this is research now. So it's not, this is not a regular comp. Because it's an R3, it's considered, it could be an income property. It might be currently an income property. And I saw some structures in the back there when we were looking at the map at the top down view. So, you know, I need to know more, but if it's an income property, now the question.
It's a single family right now.
It's a single family right now. Okay. So then are there structures in the back, additional occupant? Can someone take occupancy of anything in the back? Okay. Now my next thing is I'm going to take that address and I'm going to go to the city. I'm going to go to city planning, zoning. I'm going to get a ticket. I'm going to go talk to planning. What can I build at this property? What will it allow? Maximum, how many units, how much, what's the parking restriction? Like how much parking do I have to have per unit? What's the density? I'm going to start doing all that research and gonna have a number, like whatever it is, have a number, but it's an income property.
Yeah.
So whenever dealing with income property, income is what you're looking at. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking at my cash on cash return. That's the cap rate. So if I'm buying a property for $1 million and then I'm collecting all the rent and I'm paying all the expenses and I'm paying the property tax, and after everything, I'm left with $30,000 at the end of the year on my $1 million, that's a 3% return. That's a 3% cap, 3 cap. All right, so that's how it's calculated, just cash on cash. How much you're in it for, after all the expenses, how much did you make? That divided by the purchase price is your cap rate. All right, guys. This is tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
I mean, somebody, the developer is gonna say, I'm gonna pay 1.8 million, because I know I'm gonna build 3 units on that one.
Yeah.
Depends on the lot size.
Yeah.
And it's a very good rental area.
Mm.
They even got some 500,000 for it.
Maybe.
Your meeting, right, Jason?
Yeah, really.
He knows about his lots and
Okay, I'll come in like.
that's a problem.
All right.
Thank you, JJ. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, I hope I helped you a little bit.
Thank you, bye.
Thanks, JJ.
All right, have a good day.
James, you're staying for 2 o'clock.
Yes.